During the 1960s, America witnessed an increase in the possibilities production frontier through the introduction of women to the labor force. GDP per capita increased as an untapped portion of the population began working. Since then, the U.S. has seen a steady rise in the number of educated women and GDP per capita. Other countries around the world have been slower to take advantage of this resource. India and China have both began to educate a greater portion of their women and introduce them to the workforce. Conversely, most of the Middle East has remained stagnant, as well as Africa. Whether an increase in GDP initially allowed for more women to be educated or vice versa is still a contentious point, but most economists agree that educated and working women have a positive effect on GDP growth. Many countries in the Middle East have been slower or entirely unwilling to utilize women in the workplace. The Huffington Post estimates an increase of 47% in GDP across the Middle East when women participate as actively in the labor market as men. As the graph shows, both Iran and Pakistan saw a positive correlation between education of women and increases in GDP. Afghanistan, on the other hand, has a very low level of educated women and has seen very little increases in GDP. Countries like Qatar and Jordan have recently seen an increase in women's education. However, the subsequent spike in GDP does not occur because these same women are left out of the labor market. Brookings describes the boomerang effect, in which women are excluded from education, perform well when they have access, and then are once again excluded from the labor market. As the second graph shows, once again, Iran and Pakistan saw a positive correlation, while Jordan and Afghanistan saw no change. Qatar may be an outlier due to the wealth of their oil fields, but Brookings singles them out as a country that could take advantage of their unused population. Over the past few decades, the amount of time Chinese women spent in school on average has risen from 2 to 9 years, while the GDP per capita of China has risen by 600%. The rise in education is thanks primarily to government initiatives making it easier for country children to receive an education at a lower cost. This increase is also thanks to China's abolishment of the one-child policy. Since there is less interfamily gender discrimination, it allows more young girls to go to school. Although Chinese women spend more time in school, their percentage of the workforce has not increased over the past 3 decades. Chinese women, ages 15 and older, have an employment rate of around 69%, which is 2% less than what it was in 1971. Although this number shows little change, it is important to note that this figure is very high and shows that women have a stable position in the workplace, and it can be assured and assumed that their productivity has risen due to the large increases in GDP per capita. Since 1970, women in India have increasingly spent more time in school. In 1970, women spent an average of 1 year in school in comparison to an average of 5.7 years in 2009. Additionally, the country's GDP per capita increased approximately $3,000 over the same amount of time. This increase in education is largely due to the Indian government's commitment to raising literacy and providing education for all children. In their constitution, there is a policy that promises free and compulsory education for all children until they complete the age of 14. However, there are still females who do not have the money to send their children to school due to the cost of textbooks, transportation, and clothing. Their national policy of education helps provide special attention for these young women who lack the resources to attend school or who live in tribes and remote locations. While women are certainly receiving more education, their involvement in the workforce and the workplace has remained at a constant percentage of 32% for 4 decades. This means that the productivity of women who are employed has increased. Despite the rise in GDP per capita, India can see a larger increase if more women are able to enter the workforce. The final countries we will be looking at are the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Egypt. As you can see on the graph, both countries have seen their women become more educated over time, but the Congo has seen its GDP decline massively, while Egypt has increased over time, that is until 2010, when the political uprising occurred and sent the country's GDP into stagnation. While Egypt has seen a steady increase in their education, it was not until 1990 when the EFA initiative was put into action by the Jometian Conference, which stated that education is a human right and should be given to all. This initiative increased the care given to and education of young children, as well as removing gender differences in schools by granting all children the right to attend a school free of charge. This has allowed education levels to rise, while GDP could fall, with the constant fighting in Egypt seen throughout history. The increase of educated women has allowed them to transition from primarily farming and fishing jobs to more professional and modern jobs with higher productivity. The Congo, however, has not invested in education until recently, which we can see the beginnings of in our data. The real effect of the free education by Prime Minister Ponyo cannot be seen until recently, when the Democratic Republic of the Congo's GDP has increased by over 6% per year. By investing in education, it is allowing for more skilled and higher quality workers, especially women, to bring their country's economy out of the ruin it has been throughout their centuries of wars. Women have a long way to go in order to be fully represented in the workforce, but their education is allowing them to obtain more state-regulated jobs and jobs that require more formal education, bringing a higher rise to the Congo's GDP.